for asking such questions as Pakistan approaches an election later this month. And I do hope that the Charter of Demands at the end of this consultation will mark the beginning of a broad-based collaboration among stakeholders and will form the basis of engaging the new government after elections to drive action. We're also aiming to organise a shadow disability summit on July 5th to publicise the charter that you will develop this workshop and to request stakeholders to endorse and support the proposed actions. We believe in the principle of nothing about us without us, so you are in the driving seat. Your inputs, your leadership, your voice is crucial in this process. I'll stop here, and unfortunately I can't stay for the rest of the workshop due to other commitments back in DFID. But I do see a number of colleagues from DFID here who will participate in the proceedings, and I look forward to reading the Charter and to working with you on disability inclusion in the weeks and months to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kemi, and for also providing us a guideline and direction for the discussions. That's great. Thank you. We move on. Atif Saab, we invite you to come and share your thoughts and give an overview of the disability landscape in Pakistan. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for facilitating, moderating this event and setting up the context of the whole workshop. And you have heard from Kemi's remarks that this workshop will be an important meeting to collect feedback from all the stakeholders for the Global Summit. And the delegation from Pakistan, whoever is attending the Global Summit, will pledge the deliberations collected from all the wider group of stakeholders from this workshop. Once again, I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of the organizers of this workshop, and thank you very much for joining us today for this very important discussion. Disability movement in Pakistan for the rights emerged in early 80s in Pakistan. Mainly, the systematic care was started by government of Pakistan through the establishment of Ministry of Social Welfare and Special Education.
We move on.
And all over the country, special education centers were started. Vocational rehabilitation was started, and registration of persons with disabilities through the Council of Rehabilitation of Disabled Persons was established. That was the first step when government started taking care of persons with disabilities, but the focus was mainly on the education, rehabilitation, and employment. 1% quota was first introduced in 1981 in Pakistan for persons with disabilities in all kinds of jobs, whether in private sector or the government sector. In late 80s, organizations of disabled persons emerged. And they started a movement which Kemi has mentioned in her remarks, that nothing about us without us. That was the slogan for the disability rights movement in Pakistan. People with disabilities started campaigning that we know our issues very well, because we are the people who are facing it. We are the people who are facing all the barriers in our lives, starting from the school, going to the college, finding a job, and going to a social life, and mainstreaming in the social life. So all the possible barriers we face, we know how to handle it. So nothing about us without us was the slogan of the disability rights movement in Pakistan. And we have seen in late 90s that all over the country a network of DPOs, Disabled People's Organization, was spread. The organizations run by disabled persons themselves. They raise their issues at all the platforms, in the government corridors, at the civil society meetings, discussions, roundtables, everywhere. Like all the seminars, they were trying to have a seat on the table in all the meetings. And the day came when development organizations and government included them in their discussions. So they understood the issue that without having the voices of people with disabilities, it is not possible to develop inclusive policies. And the Global Summit, one of the greater evidence, Global Disability Summit, which is going to be held in London in July, is a very visible landmark that all the key stakeholders, including governments, corporate sector, development sector, and DPOs, they are going to discuss disability as a global agenda. This is in Millennium Development Goals, disability was totally excluded, and in SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, disability has clear indications and demarcations. UN adopted UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2006, UN General Assembly, and Pakistan ratified in 2011. And now we are moving towards the implementation, or achieving the implementation of UNCRPD in the country. The overall focus of the disability movement was protecting the rights of persons with disabilities, removing the barriers, making enabling society. Not a quota-based, not a charity-based, not a medical-based. The society should be rights-based. People with disabilities should be accepted as the member of the society, and every facility should be enabled for everyone, not only for few one. Education for all cannot be achieved until the people with children with disabilities are counted. But then the issue was raised that how many are you? How many people with disabilities live in Pakistan? That was a question which was never answered. The government of Pakistan said that they are 2.49% of the whole population. United Nations said they are 10% of the whole population. And the latest report, World Report on Disability in 2012 mentioned that people with disabilities are 12 to 15% of the whole population. So why there was a big difference in the number of these people? The understanding of disability, the definition of disability, and the questions which were asked in the census were not very clear. Then they had a meeting which came up with a set of questions, which is called the Washington Group set of questions. They were developed, and they were finally included in the census of Pakistan as well, but they were too late. The census was started, and questionnaire was included few days after the starting of national census. Again, people with disabilities remained uncounted population of the country. The data, that how many they are, how many we are, is an important issue, need to be addressed. Besides that, there are many other issues, like including people with disabilities in the disaster risk reduction strategies is critically important. Pakistan had faced a lot of disasters, and people with disabilities were last to rescue. They were left behind. I'm very happy to have Dr. Qazi Azmat Isa Sahib from the Chief Executive of Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund. He has addressed this issue very deeply and included in all these strategies of disaster reduction and rehabilitation to include people with disabilities. We have government stakeholders here who have been part of this process. So then there came an issue of decision-making, inclusion of people with disabilities in the political participation, in the electoral access. I'm feeling very proud to share with you that in today's newspaper you can see a news. Yesterday there was a press briefing in the Election Commission of Pakistan. In the history of Pakistan, first time the postal ballot for severely disabled persons have been allowed by the Election Act 2017 by Election Commission of Pakistan. 280 polling stations will be fully accessible for the wheelchair users. 650 election officers have been trained on disability issue, how to handle with people with disabilities on the polling station. So this is a big achievement, and I think we should appreciate it. So these kind of achievements we have seen in the recent past. Then to institutionalize these efforts, there was a need of a proper executive legislation in line with UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The legislation was drafted. It was accepted by the National Assembly. It was under the discussion at the subcommittees and of the National Assembly in the Senate. But unfortunately, the tenure of the government was completed, and the last term, which when this law was to be adopted in the National Assembly, is still pending. So we hope from the next government, whoever will resume, will continue the process, and we don't need to restart everything. So the drafted law, which is on the tables of the decision maker, will be accepted, and Pakistan will have first ever legislation. This legislation covers all aspects of lives of people with disabilities: employment, rehabilitation, accessibility, political participation, in all aspects. And there are two wide topics which need attention of the development stakeholders. But today, in this 2 days consultation workshop, which will develop a charter of demand, very articulated points for the Global Disability Summit, will focus only on 4 thematic areas. The first thematic area is tackling stigma and discrimination, which is the most important part need to be addressed. And we have been addressing it for the last 20 years. The people with disabilities are marginalized, uncounted because of the stigma, because of exclusion, because of the negative attitudes of the society. In developing countries, not only in Pakistan, in most of the developing countries in the world, people with disabilities are still facing the social model of, medical model of disability and the charity model of disability. Like people with disabilities are always assumed as a patients, so they need to be fixed. So it's a medical model, which is now obsolete. And because of this radical model, people with disabilities are not included in the mainstream because they are still in the domain of medical approach. Because of charity model, people with disabilities are only recipient of the charity checks or the wheelchairs from the government, which is not effective for the inclusion. If we think that, like, I will share a very interesting example with you. I met a disabled guy who asked me for a wheelchair, who requested for a wheelchair. And I asked him that last year you got a wheelchair, what happened with that? He said that I go for my job and I have a shop, so my wheelchair is broken, I need new one. So if we will still maintain the charity model, how many wheelchairs we will give him? Every year? Every 2 years? So how many wheelchairs the government can provide? We need to establish a rights-based model. The person who's earning, who's working, can earn a wheelchair, can have a wheelchair. All the people who are deserving, who can't afford it, they will get the right. They will get the wheelchair from through a systematic approach. The second thematic area for this workshop is inclusive education. Inclusion in education. Like, so far education, like our education policies are totally separated from the special education strategies. We need to merge it. We need to explore the ways how developed countries have included special education classrooms in the mainstream schools, how they have included children with mild disabilities, how they have created enabling environment in the schools. So I'm expecting that in this session, after the panelist presentations by the panelists, all of the audience will give their point of view, how to include children with disabilities in the mainstream education. The third thematic area is economic empowerment. We believe that without economic empowerment, people with disabilities cannot be mainstream in the society and cannot become a part of the development process. So we are expecting a very good discussion in this panel as well, and we have very eminent panelists and chair for this session. In the first half of tomorrow. The fourth and the more very important discussion will be around harnessing technology and innovation. Technology and the adoption of technology is the most smart way to include people with disabilities in the mainstream of development. And we are very happy that we have representatives from Ministry of IT today in this meeting, who will talk about how government is striving to make their ICT, information communication technology, inclusive for disabled persons. We have, I can't name everyone, but I can see some representatives from the Deaf Reach, Richard Gary, who has been very innovative to introduce sign language through digital media to people with hearing impairment and people without hearing impairment, so that they can understand to bridging the communication gap. In all these four thematic areas, we will get the deliberation from the people presented in this room, and we are also getting this input through web-based survey forms who are from the people who are not presented here, who want to come and or couldn't make it, but still we want a wider feedback from all over the country. Once again, I would thank you, all of you. Like, it's a very diversified group of people sitting in this room, from development sector, from media, from corporate sector, from government, and from all provincial governments from all over the country. And thank you very much once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alif Saab, for that very comprehensive overview of the disability landscape, and also giving us some idea of what's to come over the next 2 days. We now move on to Ms. Munazza Gilani, Country Director for Site Savers, to share thoughts on disability inclusion and achieving SDGs and other international commitments.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and good morning. First of all, I would like to welcome you all on behalf of the organizing committee of Site Savers, DFID Pakistan and STEP. It is indeed an honor for me and for my team at Site Savers to be part of this very important consultation workshop, which will actually lead towards a charter of demands for disability inclusion in Pakistan for the Global Disability Summit, which is scheduled for July 24th in UK. I would like to briefly talk about the international commitments in relation to the disability inclusion and its standing within the framework of UNCRPD and Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030. With 15% of the world's population and 20% of the world's poor made up of persons with disability, mainstreaming and social inclusion of persons with disability is very critical and crucial for every society globally. It's not only from the human rights point of view, but also from a broader economic development perspective. This task is not for the government alone, but we all have a mutual responsibility to contribute in this context, from the private sector, from international NGOs, from donor agencies, and persons with disabilities themselves. The Sustainable Development Goals, we all know they are a set of 17 global goals aiming to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all by 2030. And to ensure its success, the 2030 agenda must remain of the people, by the people, and for the people, committing the world to global action for the next 12 years. Persons with disabilities were previously not included in the Millennium Development Goals very visibly, and consequently they were excluded from many development initiatives and funding streams. While in contrast, under the 2030 agenda, there are total 7 references made to disability for education, for employment, for reducing inequalities and making inclusive cities, particularly for disaggregation of data by disability, and altogether 11 in Agenda 2030 and 9 in global indicators. There is a strong reference to persons with disability and their inclusion in the society. Some other references to persons with disability and disability inclusion in many other United Nations and global documents include Beijing Platform for Action, which has 24 references to persons with disabilities. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. It has 5 references to persons with disability and additional 2 references to the universal design of accessibility as well. The accelerated modalities of action pathway has 10 references to persons with disabilities. Report of the Open Working Group of General Assembly on SDGs has 2 references to persons with disability. And the resolution number 67 of 290, the modalities resolution on high-level political forum working group method, has 1 reference to the persons with disability. So all these references actually give a reassurance and an ownership towards the inclusion of persons with disability in the whole development agenda and the 2030 agenda particularly. The best thing about the 2030 agenda is that it was created with an inclusion of persons with disability with their active participation throughout the process. And now it is the responsibility of the states, disability movement, and organizations like us to ensure that the implementation of the agenda is carried out with the inclusion of persons with disabilities both at the local and national level. The agenda should be for the people, and so is to empower persons with disabilities to fully enjoy their rights as enshrined in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The 2030 agenda for SDGs and sustainable development also offers a unique opportunity to implement and monitor the UNCRPD, whereas the motto of 2030 agenda is leave no one behind, with the pledge to recognize the dignity of every person and to reach first those further at risk of marginalization. The Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities brings about a change in the approach to disability, leaving the medical and charity approaches behind by adopting the human rights-based approach to disability. UNCRPD, we all know, it's a binding document and framework, and is developed it gives a both legal standards and programmatic approach of implementation. The 2030 agenda represents a unique opportunity to increase efforts for the realization of the human rights of persons with disabilities, enabling the allocation of the necessary resources and promoting the adoption of policy that informs the development agenda. The SDGs will not be achieved if persons with disabilities are left behind. In order to ensure this, implementation of the 2030 agenda must be guided by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Very fortunately, Pakistan has recently requested the high-level political forum on sustainable development under the auspices of the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, for Pakistan to be inscribed on the list of countries participating in the National Voluntary Review for the implementation of 2030 agenda in the country, which is scheduled for 2019 high-level political forum. This basically reflects that Pakistan gives great importance to the implementation of the 2030 agenda. This will provide Pakistan with an opportunity to reflect and share the key messages, the key challenges faced during this journey of implementation of 2030 agenda. In the end, I would like to reiterate that a big change is needed to include persons with disabilities in laws, policies, and strategies that has a direct or indirect impact on the lives of even a single individual with disability. One way to do is to ensure representation in the parliament. There is representation of women and other minority groups, but not a single seat in Pakistan legislature is reserved for persons with disabilities. Public representation has many benefits, including not just speaking on behalf of persons with disabilities, but also to influence decision at higher level of government, and also bring a change in the negative perception towards disability. Additionally, political parties must work to mainstream sustainable development within the national discourse. Their manifestos might highlight social and economic issues, but also ensure they are SDG compliant, and would shape the electoral debate to specific objectives rather than broad rhetoric debates or pledges. This consultation workshop will actually not be a single activity, but it's actually a continuation of a broader collaboration between all the stakeholders who will be participating in this consultation. And this will actually lead to a sustainable change in Pakistan for empowerment of social inclusion of persons with disabilities. In the end, I would just like to wish you all good luck for a very fruitful and useful discussions over the next 2 days that will actually feed in towards a very comprehensive charter of demands for disability inclusion in Pakistan, and will also contribute towards the Global Disability Summit discussions in London. I would like to end here with this saying, rather advice of Stephen Hawking, the famous scientist for persons with disabilities, basically. He said that my advice to other disabled persons would be to concentrate on things your disability doesn't prevent you doing well, and don't regret the things it interferes with. Don't be disabled in spirit as well as physically. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Munazza. And ladies and gentlemen, from the three previous speakers, you would see that there are some common themes emerging. We need to have policies, legislation that are disability inclusive. We need to do more in terms of implementation. We've got frameworks, but how do we implement them? And I think these will be some of the things that we'll be discussing in the panel sessions. We now come to the last speaker for the opening session. We are very pleased to have with us Nisar Ahmed Saab, who's the Deputy Secretary, Deputy Chief, and Head of the Social Welfare Section in the Ministry of Planning, Development and Reforms. The Ministry of Planning, Development and Reforms is also the co-host of this particular consultation meeting. So we are very pleased that we have a high-level representation. Nisar Ahmed Saab, over to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Respectable guests, dear colleagues, and organizers of this event, Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Thank you. We say welcome to the Acting Secretary, Ministry of Planning, Development and Reform in these consultation workshops. Thank you, sir. I am really indeed happy on organizing these events and providing opportunity to the Ministry of Planning, Development and Reform that this consultation workshop should produce concrete and good outcome recommendations to share at the level of the Global Disability Forum and Conference. And recommendations of whatever will be achieved from that form will be incorporated in development plans of the Government of Pakistan. At present, I would like to share that a lot of initiatives at policy planning and level have been taken in this country. As some of our colleagues discussed earlier, that there are 4 thematic areas of the of this disability forum and conferences. So whatever will be recommendations that will be incorporated in development plans, and many things have already been incorporated in annual plan 2017-18, Vision 2025, and so on. So, in result of all initiatives which have been taken by the federal government, many development programs have been initiated or under the implementation in the provinces. As Mr. Atif Sheikh already discussed that inclusion is very important. In national policy, in national education policy, there is a provision, there is a chapter of inclusive education, but effective implementation in this area is required. And a lot of work on inclusive education has already been done by the Director General of Special Education, Dr. Khalid Naim, is sitting here, who has contributed a lot of in this regard. So we have also made development plan of the government published by the Planning Commission. Inclusive education is very important. That the person with disabilities, the children should be enrolled in normal schools, and normal school teachers should also be trained to impart education training and rehabilitation to the persons with disabilities. As far as already discussed, that there should be also entrepreneurship approach to provide job to the person with disabilities. So in this regard, I would like to share with our colleagues and distinguished guests that Planning Commission has established a Center for Social Entrepreneurship at the federal level, and the Center of Social Entrepreneurship has mobilized the society, coordinated with the universities, and provided opportunities to all, irrespective of the gender, sex, and disability. To all people, if they have a good innovative ideas, they may present their business, they may pitch their any business ideas to solve the issues of the society, particularly faced by the persons with disabilities, and they can also win a seed money grant up to rupees 0.5 million to implement their ideas in urban or rural areas in their domain. Planning Commission effectively contributed to give to persons with disabilities and to mainstream the persons with disabilities in the planning process, and their voices should be heard during preparation of the development plan of this country. In this regard, SDGs unit has been established in the Planning Commission, and I think that all the sections of the are have inclusion in the SDG and the SDGs initiatives, and a lot of work has been done. Further, we say welcome all the inputs, all the contributions of the people, and whatever recommendations, outcomes will be prepared in result of consultation of this conference would be incorporated in future development plans, in future development plans of this country. And we would also like to share with the provincial governments, the representative of the provincial governments, Department of Social Welfare, Special Education, and Ministry of Human Rights are also sitting here. So all the issues which are concerned with the social welfare, human rights, interfaith harmony, peace and development, special education would be solved with efforts of the all stakeholders, with support of the NGOs, DFID, and international organizations. Finally, I am very thankful. I say thanks to the organizers of this event, particularly DFID, State Site Saver Organization, and administration of the Planning Commission also, who supported us in organizing these events, and which would be very helpful in collection of outputs and recommendation of this workshop. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Nisar Ahmed Saab, for your thoughts and some really great suggestions. We are very fortunate to have with us Sayyid Tariq Mahmood Jafri Saab, who's the Acting Secretary, Ministry of Planning, Development and Reforms. I've always been very inspired by the change in terminology, and I think a lot of the participants will be looking towards disability reforms in planning and development under your ministry. Nisar Ahmed Saab, Tariq Mahmood Jafri Saab, we welcome you to present your remarks.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Distinguished guests, functionaries of the federal and provincial government, civil society organizations, Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I think first of all I should apologize for being late. There are no excuses and no justifications. So simply my regrets and my apologies. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to be here in this gathering, in this August gathering for the inaugural session of the country-level consultation workshop on Global Summit on Disability, jointly organized by the Ministry of Planning, Development and Reform, Special Talent Exchange Program, STEP, Site Savers International with the support of the Department for International Development, DFID. I take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to STEP, Site Savers International and DFID for arranging this important consultative workshop involving key stakeholders from public sector organizations, civil society, donor organizations, and the corporate sector well in time prior to the forthcoming Global Summit on Disability to be held in London in July 2018. I am told that this Global Disability Summit is aiming to galvanize the international efforts to address disability inclusion in developing countries around the world and act as the start point for major change on this important issue. I also came to know that the objective of this scheduled summit is to raise global attention and focus on neglected areas of disability, bring new voices and approaches to broaden engagement, mobilize new global and national commitment on disability, and to showcase best practices across the world. The 4 thematic areas which are identified for deliberation in line with the objectives of the Global Summit on Disability with tackling stigma and discrimination, inclusion in education, routes to economic empowerment, and harnessing technology and innovation rightly address the core problems facing the special people world over. As far as Pakistan is concerned, persons with disabilities and their empowerment, equality and mainstreaming have gained priority in the public sector planning and policy discourse during the last decade. First ever national policy for persons with disabilities was adopted after approval from the Federal Cabinet in 2002, and subsequently the National Action Plan 2006 was introduced. The government of Pakistan is committed for realization of the rights of persons with disabilities, and the same is evident from ratification of UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, UNCRPD, in July 2011. It would be quite pertinent to mention here that after the devolution of the social sector ministries as a result of 18 constitutional amendment in 2011, the role of provincial governments has enhanced manifolds for policy formulation, legislation, and service delivery at the grassroots level. Although the initiatives to empower the vulnerable segments of the society are gradually gaining momentum at the provincial level, but still a lot of work needs to be done in the areas of tackling stigma and discrimination, inclusion in education, economic empowerment, and harnessing technology and innovation for bringing meaningful change in the lives of persons with disabilities through education, training, and rehabilitation. The mainstreaming of persons with disabilities into national development process is very crucial. Towards this, the Vision 2025, 12th Five-Year Plan, and the Annual Plan 2018-19 envision to provide an enabling environment and equal opportunities to persons with disabilities for the development of their full potential to enjoy the benefit of economic growth, prosperity, and social development. All of this can be made possible only through coherent initiatives as taken by the federal and provincial governments as well as the other stakeholders. Since Pakistan is on a list of 12 priority countries for the Global Disability Summit, an effective national engagement is significantly important to make this summit a success and further ensure a meaningful representation from Pakistan. In this regard, formulation of a national framework encompassing the welfare of persons with disabilities, PWDs, is certainly a prerequisite. It is the need of the hour that all the key stakeholders at national level join their hands together and define a way forward for meaningful interventions to protect the right of persons with disabilities in line with Government of Pakistan's national and international commitments. I hope this two-day event will engage all concerned and relevant stakeholders at the country level for meaningful deliberations to be contributed at forthcoming Global Summit on Disability. Now, I once again thank the organizers for their joint efforts with the Ministry of Planning, Development and Reform, and sincerely wish for fruitful outcomes of the event. All the best to all of you from myself and the Government of Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Saab, for very encouraging remarks. Your comments are nothing less than policy for us, so we look forward to taking some of those suggestions forward. Planning and development in Pakistan plays a major role, particularly in allocation of resources, in development schemes, and I think when we come to some of the different sessions, we will try to see how we can actually take this process forward, because there is a lot of orientation that will be required. We'll need to bring disability as part of development programs. There's a lot of data issues that need to be addressed. So I think with the guidance from Secretary Saab, I think we'll be able to come back to you with some very clear, concrete and practical suggestions that the government could then implement. We now come to the end of the opening session, and before we break for tea, I can see some very eager faces, desperate for tea, but just wait for a few minutes. We need to have a group photograph. Imran Sahab, where are you? Okay. May I request the wheelchair, persons on wheelchair to please come forward so that we can make the arrangements. Atif Sahab, anything else?
Thank you. They're managing.
They're managing. Okay, okay. So, Imran Sahab, we are at your disposal. आप guide कीजिए कैसे करना है. मैडम आप कुछ कहना चाह रही हैं? सॉरी उस वक्त वो मैं सवाल नहीं ले सकता था जी. Okay. Madam, thank you very much. We've got the gist of your comment. We'll have an opportunity during the panel sessions to discuss this at length. Secretary Saab,
make a comment. I want to. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your input. बड़ी मेहरबानी आपकी. मैं सिर्फ ये अर्ज करूँगा कि you are always welcome. Very kindly अगर आप तशरीफ लाएं प्लानिंग डिवीजन में तो हमें बड़ी खुशी होगी कि हम आपके साथ एक सेशन करें, मीटिंग करें और इंशाल्लाह फ्यूचर के लिए ये 5-year प्लान्स और जो भी हमारी पॉलिसीज हैं उनमें आपकी रिसर्च और आपकी एफर्ट्स है उसको इनकॉर्पोरेट करें. ये यही पर्पस है कि जी सारे मिलके जो है कोई कोशिश करें बेहतरी के लिए. तो आई थिंक यू विल बी मोस्ट वेलकम इन प्लानिंग डिवीजन.
Thank you very much. Please, can you arrange yourself?
May I request Dr. Bilal Raza Jameel to come on the stage, Kashif Bhatti Saab from Pakistan Telecommunication, Richard Gary, Richard and Ms. Afsha Akhtar from Government of Punjab, if you can join us, and the representative from Government of Balochistan, Government of Sindh. May I request all of you, sir, Shahzad Saab from Ministry of Human Rights, if you can join us, Asfatullah Niazi Saab, if you can join us, sir. So, yeah, Khalid Naeem Saab from Australia. Be careful.
Richard, it was you.
Dr. Ahmed Saab from Directorate General of Special Education and friends from DFID on the back.
Definitely.
Didn't join us. Miss Benaz from Boston University, you can join us.
There are only a few people left. Please come to the front. आप लोग नील कर सकते हैं ताकि उसमें शामिल हो जाएं. आ जाएं जी. जी. सब आ जाएं. बिल्कुल. लेकिन आप सामने जरा नील कर लें. Find a place for yourself. आइए जी. Okay, आगे बैठ जाएं जी. Photographers, please make sure you get everybody. इनको नहीं, वो फिर फोटो में नहीं आएंगे अगर इसमें इधर इनको ना, वो फोटो में नहीं आएंगे फिर. नहीं, अगर यहाँ आप इधर आ. आगे मैडम आप ही आ जाएं. आप उधर बैठी हैं. नो ओके, आप बैठे. आ जाओ बैठो. आ जाएं जी. Is everybody there? Jamshed Saab, are you happy? Not really. Okay, what can we do?